4 ultra marathons, including 72 kilometer Khardungla Challenge in 2017, 110 kilometer Malnad Ultra in 2018, and a 80 kilometer Browntown Ultra in 2021. So the Shailendra ji is the moderator for the biodiversity group. I hand over the stage to Siddharth or Komal to introduce our next moderator, Sachin.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be introducing Ms. Sachin, sir. So our moderator for the youth session is Sachin Kumar, who holds a PhD in green livelihoods and is working as a professor in geography in Himachal Pradesh, an advocate for a community-centric sustainable development paradigm. He has published nearly 25 journal articles, book chapters, country reports on the issue of livelihood planning and career development. I will hand over the session now to Mr. Sachin Kumar. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess, Shailendra, you can go ahead with the biodiversity stuff, and then I'll get into you.
Yeah, thank you, Amrita and Siddharth, and all the other guests who are here. Farida, are you here? Farida, you are my only hope. You are from Hyderabad.
I am taking the call from my phone because suddenly I lost the connection on my laptop.
It's okay.
So I'm here.
It's okay. Good to see you back here, because I saw you going out of the meet and then I thought whether you'll come back or not. Yeah, good to see you here. And I see a lot of biodiversity in your background as well. Okay. Are those good
Yes.
pictures?
Yes.
Because two sessions are merged here, Sachin,
Yeah.
I thought that perhaps we should take opportunity to sort of combine the two themes of youth and
Okay.
biodiversity.
Okay.
Youth biodiversity and, let's say, climate change and sustainability makes perfect sense in that sense. And we have just got over our COP26, where all these issues came up very highly.
You can introduce the other panelists, Sachinji, and we can continue.
Okay. So, Shailendra, would you like to begin with the quick introduction, Farida, first, or I think it should be done in front of her, right?
Farida is not here yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's just joined.
She's just joined.
Okay. So
I'm back. Sorry about that. I don't know, something's
All
wrong
right.
with the internet.
And Farida, it seems as if you keep traveling in this galaxy, either to some.
Only.
I don't know, but my own experience has been that if you use backgrounds, it usually clogs your network, and also, and it is a memory hogger. Your background, anyways, that pictures are really nice, so you should keep that. Don't go to Mars now.
No, that was for some different session I had.
Okay.
So that's why it stayed on.
yeah, I think.
Good to see you back. Yeah, let's continue now.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I have got Farida with me. Farida, she is a state director of WWF. And I'm glad we are in a biodiversity, otherwise people would think WWF, what is WWF doing here? But she is with Hyderabad office, formerly called the Andhra Pradesh State Office, and she has had country. She did a master's in ecology in 1992, and then she went to work with crocodiles as a research associate in captive breeding of venomous snakes as well. Okay, that's great variety crocodile and snakes. Now she has represented WWF on many state and national level steering committees, like EGRI, which is East Godavari River Estuarine Ecosystem, Biodiversity Museum Committee, State Campa, BioSAP, Tree Protection Committee, Government of Telangana, Zoos and Parks Authority, and also in industry she has worked with CII in terms of Green Landscapes and Green Education Committee. So that's Farida for all the guests here. Thank you very much, Farida, for joining us. This is wonderful. Sachin, you want to introduce other guests?
Okay. So I have with me Abhiir. Abhiir is an active youth environmentalist at the national and international level. And he has been working in the field of environmental conservation for over 8 years. The BBC recently identified him as one of the foremost emerging youth environmentalists at the international level. His work focuses on air pollution and waste segregation. And he's currently producing a climate change podcast with a UK-based think tank. As a prominent youth leader, Abhiir is passionate about driving youth climate change. So welcome, Abhiir.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
You're welcome. Akash is around. Akash is a youth worker, social entrepreneur, and a technology consultant. Currently, he's co-leading Community Connect, which focuses on building youth leadership and active citizenship in urban spaces. In the last 4 years, Akash has worked with 300 plus youth through the civic program. He also serves as the vice curator of the Global Shapers Thane Club and is part of communities like the South Asian Youth Conference, Human Library, and Global Youth Alliance on Kindness. Akash believes in constructively working with all the stakeholders to bring about radical systemic change in society. Welcome, Akash.
Thank you, Sachin.
And next, we have Hemanth. Hemanth is a public policy researcher at the Bharati Institute of Public Policy at the Indian School of Business. His research is on complex systems, focusing on sustainability, evidence-based policy, and political action. He has also worked with multiple state governments on analyzing and framing policies on industrial development and data governance. So, Hemanth, welcome. I guess.
Thank you, Dr. Sachin. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And finally, Hamari Jamatia is around.
Yes. Hi.
Hi. I hope I was able to pronounce your name.
Yes, that's correct. Hamari Jamatia.
Okay. Hamari Jamatia is the editor of Adivasi Lives Matter. It's a platform dedicated to building storytelling capacities among the Adivasis. That means indigenous communities of India. The initiative aims to bring focus to the lives, issues, and culture of Adivasis whose stories do not get adequate representation. More than 150 youth have been trained to create multimedia content and get their voices heard. She is a former journalist who has worked with the Indian Express, Hindustan Times, The Pioneer. She is also a research scholar who writes extensively on issues pertaining to Northeast. So welcome, Hamari.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So Shailendra, you go.
Okay. So my panelists, Farida, let me start with you. I mean, let's quickly, if you have to look at the, if you look at biodiversity and the whole debate about climate change and sustainability, who are the main stakeholders that you would sort of identify that we should start working with?
You say for biodiversity and climate change?
Biodiversity, climate change, sustainability. If you look at this, I mean, I could have added youth as well, but I think Sachin is going to add just the first three parts of it.
Okay. So, well, first of all, thank you everyone, and thank you Anand Pendarkar for inviting me rather suddenly, of course, into this panel. Anand and me go back to almost 1984. We are college mates, and since then we've been in regular touch, and that's how been together working. In fact, we both literally lived in the Moderator National Park, which is home to a large number of biodiverse. It's one of the most biodiverse national parks in the city of Bombay. In fact, I wanted to just start from the premise that, when we've been talking about climate change, a lot of the dialogue has moved towards, forgotten about talking about biodiversity and the biodiversity loss, the rapid decline in biodiversity. Definitely everybody is a stakeholder. I cannot pinpoint a separate specific stakeholder. It could be the communities, right, at the ones who live very close to where all the biodiversity is. It would be a city dweller who also needs biodiversity, like Mr. Shailendra and all of us who are staying in the urban areas. For us also, biodiversity is very, very important for many reasons, as we all know. So pinpointing a particular stakeholder is very difficult, but definitely if you look at from the climate change angle or something, the communities which are very closely associated with them, especially I would like to specially here talk about agricultural communities, and they are definitely one of the very big stakeholders. The forest communities who live and are inside the forest, they definitely become the very big stakeholders. And very often what is happening is that by declaring so many no-go zones or saying that we need to protect and conserve, we are actually maybe taking away people who are dependent on this biodiversity. We're taking them away from the biodiversity. In fact, if you look at some of the biodiversity components, these are actually there for sustainable, wise use. So this is something which we are not talking about. Either it becomes a forest area, which is a complete no zone, no extraction, no removal, and all that, or we are talking about, protecting certain species, giving greater protection. So for me, the people who are in very close connection with biodiversity, they are the biggest stakeholders. And I think there is a greater requirement to connect biodiversity and climate change. Some of the very small, like we talk about very big species, like you can see behind me also, which Mr. Shailendra Bisht just pointed out, you have a lot of biodiversity behind you itself. But for me, because these were put up by my colleagues, they are there. For me, the important biodiversity is a bee. For me, the important biodiversity is a frog. For me, the important biodiversity is the agricultural variety, which we need to, the wild variety of our agricultural crops, which we need to conserve. So, and these, in the face of climate change, the impact on these kind of biodiversity is really huge. And I don't think we even understand much about these biodiversity. We are not even, I don't think there is a very deep research which happens. So some bit of research is definitely happening on agricultural crops and the impact of climate change, or how agricultural fields actually also contribute to climate change. So it's a kind of a catch-22 situation there. So there are a lot of these facets of biodiversity that we need to discuss when we also talk about climate change. So the relation between of the impact of biodiversity, especially agricultural diversity, on climate change, and also how biodiversity will be impacted due to climate change. These are some of the major key areas that we need to be discussing, and a lot more. Like I can give you an example. I was talking to a few experts who work on frogs, and a lot of our frog species are rather being affected by a fungus, which is called the chytrid fungus. I think many of you may be aware of it. And this chytrid fungus is spreading worldwide, and this could be also because of climate change. So there are these things which are happening. So yeah, I don't know, this is what I would like to put forward.
Yeah, thanks, Farida, for that. I think could we go on to identifying the stakeholder from the youth group as well? I mean, Sachin, or do you want just to? I have a follow-up question to her.
I think you can go ahead with the follow-up question, because the format I'm thinking right now is I would, if for the youth group, I'm saying, I would request each of the experts to make a quick presentation first, based on their own experiences for 3 to 4 minutes, pertaining to, the stakeholders and the key opportunities and threats. And then perhaps we can come back to discussion at the end. So I think you can go ahead with your follow-up question right now.
So Farida, my follow-up question, I think you sort of alluded to it, but whenever this whole debate of sustainability comes in, sustainability coupled with biodiversity, so preservation of biodiversity, or let's say increase in biodiversity happens to be one of those goals, but that sometimes comes as an opposition to what the affected communities around, let's say, biodiversity zones or biospheres, as we have started classifying them, are working with. So there is always a conflict, and especially for an emerging market or a developing country like India, where sustainability, biodiversity, and the development imperative that people have, they seem to come in conflict. So what would be your view on that, especially because you work with, let's say, WWF and other, where, let's say, human-animal conflict, human and other conflicts are increasing every day, and we need resources, but we also need to preserve resources for future. So how do we balance that out? Sustainability is a prime thing in biodiversity as well.
That is definitely a question for which everybody is looking for an answer, and then there is no one clear answer which to give. But like you rightly pointed out, that there is a lot of conflict, and like from WWF we do work in many of these regions where huge amount of conflict, and whether it's conflict for with large animals like tigers or elephants and things like that. At the same time, one of the programs that WWF has been doing, and not very many people know, and that we work with a large number of farmers in India, especially in Warangal. We work with farmers in Punjab. We are working with farmers in Gujarat, Maharashtra, where our aim has been to how can they keep doing their agricultural practices at the same time protecting biodiversity. And we are, in fact, from agricultural fields, bringing out certain indicator species as far as which particular indicator species is there. If which is protected, even the agriculture will thrive. So we were working on certain parameters along with the Sustainable Agriculture team of WWF and the Better Cotton Initiative, where we were studying the impact of doing better practices in growing cotton, and how, if you do better practices in growing cotton, how does it impact biodiversity? And we were able to bring out a few indicator species of animals, whether they were insects or birds, which actually, if you are doing better practices in the agriculture, in the cotton field, you actually see increase in biodiversity. And this particular, we identified a bird, and this bird actually helps the farmer control insect pests. So this way, if we can create that connect, and if we like, for us, we always say that there is nothing like, especially, of course, large mammals which are highly endangered and all, we definitely are trying for greater protection and things like that. But we are very sensitive to what the communities can use, how they can use it, and how can we work with this community to see that this particular use is sustainable. And for that, we work with the communities on the ground, at the same time working with the boards like the Biodiversity Board, where the sustainable wise use of resources can be talked about. In fact, there is a lot of talk which is happening in Telangana about Podu land. I think you must be aware of it. There's a lot of things happening about that. So what we are saying is, can this Podu land, how can they do multi variety, like, instead of just going in for one kind of cropland or something like that, can they do multiple varieties of like kind of an agroforestry approach? So there are a lot of these, and then at every stage we are trying to bring in some innovation. So we'll have to, there's a lot of thinking of the out of the box that has to be done, because this is not the time where we can say that, you can only protect biodiversity or you can only look after the human being. It is the time where we have to marry both these things, like the conservation or protection or preservation, whichever word that you use. In fact, preservation is something we largely avoid using. We are talking about conservation, we are talking about protection and sustainable wise use. So, and development. In fact, few examples which have come up in many parts of the country now, even when you talked about the large animal conflict or human animal conflict. While countries like India need to grow, develop, and we need to get into, we have to find out solutions on how are we going to, amidst all this growing population, amidst all this, how are we going to protect the biodiversity? So innovative ways like, I don't know how far they are good. There are strong advocates of forests, there are strong advocates against it, like these in forest areas where there is a road widening project happening, or the underpass development or the overpass development. These are all being brought out. I don't know, I'm sure there are many who will say, okay, that's not our solution. But if it is the better of the evil, we have to choose something like that. So there are these kind of situations that we try to work with and try to find solutions, because everybody knows the problem.
Right. I think I should.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Farida. Thank you. One quick question before I start inviting my experts. This is for Hitesh maybe. Hitesh, we know that the session timing is at 3. So it has to be hard stop at 3?
No, we can spare 5-10 minutes.
5-10 minutes. So shall I say in terms of, because we have 4 speakers and we have quite a few questions to discuss. So to begin with, what I would request, I'm giving 3-4 pointers just to begin with, and I would invite one speaker after another, 3 to 4 minutes, and then we will see how many minutes do we have for the discussion. Would that be fine?
Yes, sir. Fine, sir.
Okay. And our experts, are you okay with this? Okay, great. So now let's start. So basically what we are right now looking at the youth as a overarching, or I would say, and a mainstreaming kind of a manner how youth are contributing into environmental space, or what are the issues and challenges they are facing in the process, and what we can learn from them. So what are whatever work they have done so far, what are the problems and challenges are they experiencing? What are the solutions they could think of? I'm sure it would be great if they could share their own experiences and best practices, so to say. And what are the stakeholders we need to engage more with? What are the core targets like? And what needs to be changed going forward? And whom should we actually contact? And what could be our strategies? Keeping these questions in mind, if you could go ahead, that would be great. So I would first of all invite Abhiir. 3 to 4 minutes, Abhiir.
Thank you. Hi. So yeah, I'm gonna dive right in, and I'll use some of the pointers you mentioned. I think that'll be helpful. So I come from a unique position, I think, where I've been, at 20 years currently, and having started this journey when I was 12, I think I've seen and faced some of the challenges before I sort of started to gain the legitimacy and acceptance that came with the work that I've done. So, of course, a key challenge that emerges when we look at the role of the youth in climate action, particularly in developing countries, is the very question of legitimacy. In India, the first question you'll be asked. I remember one of the key projects I had done back when I was in class 10 or class 11 was I independently signed an MOU with the Delhi Metro, which is a public-private partnership. And the first day I walked into their office and I made this pitch, the first thing they said is, "Aap to bache ho. What will you do? Who will take you seriously? Why should we take you seriously?" And I think for me, a key learning from there was to demonstrate, my as you mentioned in my introduction, my key focus, my work areas are on air pollution and waste segregation. So really looking at making people realize, and that's where I'm now moving from challenges to possible solutions, is making people realize that the youth have innovative ideas. And it's not to say that older people don't, but the key difference here is that in a society where traditionally people say that aap kya jante ho, what do you know, that comes from a certain perspective of knowing that you have varied experiences over time. But with climate change, that's not the case because we're seeing it in front of our very own eyes. There are states and places in India which have severe droughts in certain parts of the during certain parts of the year, and just a few months later there are flash floods. So there's no greater proof of climate change, and we are witnessing it, right? And we're living by it firsthand. Um, and in the face of that, we're being forced to adapt, we're being forced to think, and we're being forced to make the message relevant. You look at right now, I'm normally based in Delhi. Currently I'm in Sonipat. Here the AQI is around 405 today. And that's pathetic. I mean, any European country would have been in a it would have been a health emergency in a lockdown had it crossed 100, if not even lesser than that. So the point here is that the message needs to be made relevant to the audience. I remember I had this conversation with my grandparents, and they said, hum patake phorna chhod denge, to what difference will it make? The government has banned it, and yet people are bursting firecrackers. Um, and I said, okay, let's set that aside for a second. Do you want to see your great grandkids? Because that's an obsession I've noticed all parents and grandparents in India have. They want to see, grandkids and so on and so forth. So I asked them, do you want to see, your great grandkids? And if you want to see that happen, you need to stop and you need to start doing your bit for the planet. So that's how I make the message relevant, whether it's school children who I'm talking to about air pollution, whether it's people the age of my grandparents. It's really about making, because I've learned that human beings are selfish. You have to make climate change messaging directly relevant to them. Today we're looking at COVID, and it's really scary. But on the flip side, we've not looked at the fact that in 2019 we lost 1.67 million people due to air pollution related causes. That's just a number which people have not even thought about, unless they're working in the field of air quality. So I think it's really about that, and I feel like there are of course a few more concrete ideas which I could suggest once we have more time. But the message that I'm giving is that um, we have the power to change the tomorrow, because the tomorrow is going to be in our hands. The people who are sitting in parliament today will not be in parliament 20 years from now. And that's why it's up to us as young people to make the change and to ensure that our policymakers are sort of doing are drafting policies which would be in our interest 20 or 30 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhiir. Two clear messages. One is the issue of legitimacy, youth getting involved in the process. And two is how we are, framing the communication messages to respective stakeholders, particularly elders who think in any way we are not going to be there, and what difference my little step can make. So thank you very much for bringing that in. And then I have Akash. Akash, you come.
Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone. And I really resonate with what Abhiir shared, from his ideas to the way communication, etc. works. So I'll pick some from that, and I'll also share a few of the ideas that I have with working with youth. So as everyone knows here, and we have heard it multiple times, that climate change is one of the most frustrating problems, right? That we as youth feel. And that's something also that we feel passionately about, because we see it every day, and that can be seen through various movements, etc., so on and so forth. Fridays of Future, Extinction Rebellion, etc. Now, from there, what I feel that happens is there are multiple ways in which then that anger or what youth feels kind of goes about, that who feel overwhelmed by these constant events, things that are happening, and then they don't know how much they could do or what they could do. And also these events are coming in the end, right? Because and then again, as Abhiir also shared, that there isn't enough representation, or youth doesn't feel that their voices are heard, or they are not legitimate enough, right? And that's like a ever going, I mean, every generation of youth feels that there isn't enough representation, is what I have heard from my elders as well. And that's more relevant in climate, because that's like what's going to affect the youth the most. Now, with all of this picture together, now then the question comes that what is it can be done, right? In, like, without being paralyzed or without feeling overwhelmed by these series of events, what is something that can be done? And there is where, at least from my experience of working with youth in communities and around civic, one of the ways I see is that how can youth start localizing the action that they do, right? So as Abhiir said, that the messaging also should be localized, or the communication bit, then how can action also be localized? Which means how can youth or citizens start working in their own communities, in their own wards, for climate change, for making the environment better? And that can be, for example, as simple as, how do you make sure the trees in your area is not getting cut? Or how do you make sure that the solid waste management or the waste segregation is happening and taking place in your buildings, right? Because that in itself is adding to the climate change. A lot of times it happens that, okay, we are trying to see that how can, as me as a youth, try to make an impact on the policy that is being created or being kind of launched by the government, but there isn't a lot of voice in my with which I can work, and that's, they are more responsive as well. And that's where I can start making some shifts. And from those shifts is how then, I mean, we can build up on it. We can kind of work together and bring about larger changes. And I'm saying this because through the work of Community Connect and various programs that we are doing at Blue Ribbon, we have seen these changes happen, wherein the youth feels more confidence. It's basically, अगर आप एक दो चीजें देखेंगे अपने surrounding में, आपके action से change होते हुए, if you are able to see some of those changes happening, then you also feel that, okay, I can do something. Okay, I do these things, and then I can see the waste being segregated or solid waste management being kind of taken care of. And that's what is somewhat missing at the beginning of their work, or beginning of they wanting to work towards it. So how I look at it is maybe like starting and localizing your action and trying to kind of localize it, doing that consistently, and then building upon it, because it cannot be that, okay, just do local action and don't think about the national, international action. Everything needs to work with each other. And as everyone knows, it's so interconnected and it's complex that levels need to be done. But at least as a youth perspective, and as a youth, if working locally and then building upon it kind of makes more sense. And maybe that's also something that we could look up as collectively and as a group, that how that can be brought about, and how can we support youth to bring about those changes and make that possible. So yeah, so that's like, I would keep it to that, and maybe like in further conversations, if it opens up, I can share more ideas and examples that have come up.
Thank you, Akash. Two important takeaways as of now is, one is looking at low-lying fruits first, so that youth can take small successes, they can taste small successes. That will motivate them for larger projects to begin with. And second is localized messaging, as Abhiir said, and then localized actioneering as well, localized community engagements as well. Thank you very much for that. Next, we have Hemanth.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Sachin. Probably I'll take it from Abhiir and Akash, and also the previous speakers have pointed out more the biodiversity level. So I primarily come from a academic research background by working with Indian School of Business. So we work with multiple players, be it the business houses, governments, even community organizations. So that's so far has been my journey, but now I also work with a new lot with my new partners in crime called politicians. So I try to put in sense why it is relevant for youth to get engaged at a political level. So I'm talking about a very new experience, as Abhiir has pointed out. So communication is very important, and the messaging is right. And Akash has also pointed out that localizing it's very important. But if I just to give you an official statistic, we always talk about biodiversity. But there is also a lot of cultural diversity that exists within India, where these knowledge about biodiversity or any of this environment is embedded within it. So there are 416 languages that are officially listed within the government of India's sort of schedules in the constitution. But now the thing is, can a person or a bunch of organizations come and try to do the message in 416 languages? No, it's not possible, because it's the scale of it's so huge. It is even for it to centralize and conceptualize at a centralized level, it makes it very difficult things, because given climate change is so accelerated and the scale that needs to be achieved is so wide. And I would like to believe that haven't achieved that scale so far. I'll try to give an example, but it's not that people don't understand it. The messaging it's not their priority, so on. So I'll try to give an example where I'm currently working on the state of Rajasthan, where young people are migrating out of their villages because there is no water in the villages. So they had to look for opportunities and migrate out to somewhere, and where the likelihood of getting job is also very low. And for anyone who's between what we term as youth, earning livelihood and job is the utmost important priority in their life. But the thing is, when we sort of see how it layers around, there are causes of climate change that are being felt. But now, what is that action? Do we sort of expect these youth to come out and launch an internet sort of campaign? Not necessarily. I'll try to give an example from one of my academic research projects, where we try to see, or at least I try to think, what is the biggest climate change adaptation program that India has ever done so far? It's NREGA. It's basically giving rural people free employment or promised employment for 100 days. And you would be surprised, at least 60% of the funds. So I'm talking about something roughly around 30,000 crores every year gets spent on natural resource management at a local level. And these initiatives are decided by the local politicians, villages, what is called as a Grama Sabha setup. And it's decided every year that how would we protect our environment, or what we would need to sort of to make sure we have water for the next agriculture season, or what is the sort of trees we should, or how do we conserve water, or how do we afforest, what plantations should we take in terms of when we take up the initiative of afforestation. So these are very localized effects. They do exist. There is no need to reinvent the wheel for the youth to sort of say and look at these are the solutions. It's sort of illusion is finding these cogs and wheels and what would be would sort of influential, because now we live in the world of influences and a lot of youth are influences these days. But now the thing is, how do we localize this message with certain influences? And this can definitely sort of, I believe, for youth, not just like people who are educated, but anyone who has sort of who has the basic roti kapda makan is their priority, even they have a scope to sort of get involved in what most of us would agree as climate action. Well, I would stop at this point, and I will thank everyone for this opportunity.
Thank you, Hemanth. I think you brought quite a few very interesting things. Two things I would like to, underline right away. One is this whole issue of cultural dimension of youth engagement, cultural dimension of community engagement in entire communication, messaging, actioneering aspect. So that was one very important takeaway for me. And the second takeaway is that leveraging opportunities like NREGA with climate change action, because that's what you really pointed out very nicely. And the fact that there are quite a few things which are already happening, and we can link those things with larger global issues, and at the same time looking at larger macro processes and how those macro processes are actually shaping micro interventions and how they can feed each other. That's a very important takeaway for me right now. And then, of course, we will get back to quite a few other points if time permits. Now we have Hamari with us. Hamari would present experiences from working with the indigenous people from Northeastern perspective. Hamari.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this. I represent Adivasi Lives Matter. Basically, what it does is we work with the youth of Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu, and Tripura. That's the state that I come from, and we encourage them to write stories that about topics that affect their lives. So, environment is one concern that impacts them at a very day-to-day basis, from the fact that some of our creators live in villages which is attacked by elephants on a regular basis, to having roads washed away in flash floods and not being able to access schools, to planting trees or plants which are not necessary for them, but because government has said that you need to plant them for biodiesel, so having those plantation drives happening. So these are the kind of population which is actually living very close to nature, and anything that happens has an effect on their living situation. And when it comes to indigenous people of India, still a large majority lives in forest areas. Any policy or any decision making when it comes to environment, therefore, necessarily needs involvement of indigenous population. From the perspective of Tripura, for instance, I would like to talk about shifting cultivation. So shifting cultivation began to be discouraged by the government as a whole. It causes pollution and lots of issues. But I've also noticed that ever since shifting cultivation has reduced, we have also lost a lot of species of plants that used to be available. So for instance, there are particular types of corn, there are particular types of bananas, and particular types of rice, which only grows in shifting cultivation. There's a purple color corn, there's a black color corn, which we used to get when we were children, but it's no longer available in the market anymore. So there are consequences, and it happens because there is no consultation with the local bodies. There is no one coming and asking, like my grandparents who used to do shifting cultivation, okay, if we ask you to stop, what are the challenges that you are going to face? So somewhere there is a gap between people who are actually living lives in tandem with nature and policy making, which happens very far away. That is one thing. Another thing is that when it comes to the youth that we are working with, uh, we are encouraging them more and more to write about stories in which they are dealing directly with changes around them. So even the story that I said about elephants attacking villages and breaking down their homes, to, for instance, not being able to go to school anymore because suddenly there's a flood and the road is not there anymore. What IM or what ALM does is to encourage them to document these things, because unless there is documentation that these things are happening, we don't have a platform from which we can ask for change to happen. There are, for instance, stories that we have done which really highlights how closely people are living with nature. For instance, we have a colleague called Ashish who did a story about a place called Jaharthan. So it's a place in Jharkhand. It's a sacred space, and you cannot hurt even a leaf in that particular plantation. It is where, whenever a new village is formed, it is the first place where the new villagers come and stay for the night. So that entire area is considered to be very sacred, and you cannot hurt even a leaf. You cannot desecrate the place, and you have to be very respectful of this particular grove. So things like this are the kind of stories that we promote. There has to be documentation that these things affect. So every time there is a mining happening, you are damaging these sacred spaces. Every time there is a power plant that comes up, you are destroying these spaces. So this is one of the way. I don't know whether it's a solution, but yeah, we definitely need more engagement with the stakeholders. That's, I think, about it for now.
Right. At this point of time, I guess from your perspective, I could get a lot of ideas, but two I'd like to highlight right now. One is this whole idea of disconnect between people who are making policy and people who are actually living their life in that context. That disconnect is really glaring. And the small ways where you involve young people in engaging them with issues through stories and all, that's again very powerful. And you also brought out issues pertaining to Sacred Grove. I guess Anand wants to say something. Anand.
Thank you, Sachin, and I just wanted to point out a few things. Actually, one, that there is one biodiversity expert, and the other person, Arjun, reported sick. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So I think one thing is very clear when we're talking of youth and biodiversity together, is that there are a lot of traditional practices that are there that one has to document. And Hamari did talk about sacred groves, for example, that are there. Seed banking that is there. Seed banking has become a very, very important thing from a global perspective now. In fact, in the polar regions, there is a reservoir where a whole diversity of all species of the planets are being preserved, and they're taking gene pools from that and preserving. So, it's important that we understand that Navdanya and several other organizations have been doing it with edible foods. But we are seeing, when we talk of biodiversity, only those species which have got economic value or consumption value, they are the ones which are being considered. So even when a fish catch comes in at a landing station, hundreds of snakes and other non-edible fishes are dumped. They are called bycatch. And bycatch is not, it might, for a seller's perspective, bycatch might be just a dump. But from an ecological perspective, they are cleaners, they are decomposers, they play a very, very, they might be food of other species, and they are a link, very, very integral link in the food chain. So some of the larger species which we eat cannot survive without these bycatches. Same is the case with fungi. The edible fungi are considered important, but the poisonous fungi and several other things, we don't know. Probably the cure for cancer or cure for tuberculosis might be in some of these fungi. So one has to understand that food is one thing, medicine might be another thing. Commercialization and commercial use has to be considered, but there has to be more intense research that needs to be done. We need to look at our traditional knowledge that is there as to what were the uses. Similarly, like palms, climbers. People don't grow climbers anymore in the cities. Or palms, which used to be such an integral part of household building. Now, because of building material having gone into concrete and cement and other things, the uses of all these materials is gone. And whenever a certain festival comes in, then we start looking, okay, if I don't get a mango leaf, or if I don't get something, let me get a asupalav or some false ashoka leaf and replace it with that. Or even plastic leaves or cloth leaves will be doing. But these things had important values. Why certain plants were made into religious value? Because of the medicinal, or because of the carbon sequestration that they did. Maybe they did not assign a word called carbon sequestration to that, but there were values that were associated with these, with which the species were protected. A third thing I would like to say is that, like we saw in the talk earlier, it is important that traditional knowledge, the traditional communities are given the research know-how to be able to document their ecological knowledge that is there. Like, for example, in Arunachal Pradesh, there are, in the Eagle Nest area, the community over there is involved not only in ecotourism, but the Bugun tribe is working with conservation of birds and insects and king cobra and elephants. Last point I would like to say is that human and wildlife conflict. This is one place where more media and community organizations, there is 100% clash. We are at loggerheads that wildlife is coming and attacking us, and there is a feeling that people are going and destroying wildlife. So I think that is an area where we need a lot of mitigation, a lot of understanding how to live with wildlife. Because for 6,000 years, we have been living with wildlife, or probably for 2 million years, we've been living with wildlife. It's just now that we are saying that this is not their home anymore. Bombay is not a home for biodiversity. The blue whale cannot be found in Bombay because we have to make a coastal road, or we have to make a metro train, or we have to make a bullet train. So then tigers and leopards, or king cobras or elephants, like we are seeing in Coimbatore, that the elephant comes into campuses, and their migratory paths are stuck. So as we say, we are talking of human rights. Article 21 applies to every species, whether it is a fly, whether it is a mosquito. Biodiversity is not just what is important for people. We have to understand all those things also. Yeah. So that is what I wanted to say. I wanted to fill in the space for Arjun. And when we are talking of wetland protection, the turtles come with that, the dragonflies come with that, and those are indicators of climate change. So I think people need to understand, through education, we need to develop materials which will talk of climate change indicators. Some butterflies are moving higher up in the area, some plants are flowering in the wrong season. So all these kinds of things one has to start documenting. And who better than people who live there? And I don't mean just tribals. If you live in the city, document it in the city. If you live in the village, document it in the village. If you live on Mars, please document the biodiversity of Mars. But wherever you live, if you belong to this planet, start documenting. And that is what Biosprouts has been doing for 25 years. We've been documenting and presenting it as scientific or research material in court. Only then we can, and that's why the GIS, studies, or that's why whatever the documentation. So documentation, photo documentation, video documentation is very, very. Put a GIS tag, understand technology a little bit. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anand, for filling in.
Yeah. Hi. Just a comment, for Anand as well. It's important. Like what Anand said is very important, and I just want to add that it's important to look at the functional diversity, how things function on its own, and how they integrate with each other, not with only don't see a species as an individual species as such, but look at a larger picture, how they function together, because everyone has a role to play there. Yeah.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for bringing in very crucial points. Functional diversity and not looking a species not as a species, but as an assemblage of quite a few species. So thank you. Farida wants to say something.
I just wanted to intervene on the biodiversity part and what Rahul and Anand have said just now. In fact, just from the last couple of weeks, I have been trying to convince so many people here in Hyderabad and Telangana. This is about Neem, which all of us, many people think that Neem can never get a disease. And all across Telangana, Neem has been drying up, and there has been an issue, and it's a stem borer which is boring the neem tree, and then the fungus is taking over, leading to the drying up. So everybody is calling me to find out how can they cure this? Can they use some chemical fertilizers? They even asked me, can I fund it to do that? And I told them that, look, just like any component of biodiversity, a stem borer and a fungus also has its role to play, whether it's a loranthus which is affecting the neem tree. So this is something which it doesn't occur to people, and indiscriminate spraying of chemical fertilizers already started in the city of Hyderabad on this neem tree. So there's a lot of disconnect between the people who are practitioners on the ground and not bothering to collect information from the experts, or looking at, going deep inside and finding out what the problem is. So these are the issues like Anand said, we need to be really every component, even the stem borer has a role to play. So these are some things that we need to drive home to people who think that this is just a menace and we need to start spraying indiscriminately. So this is a live example of what is happening in the last few days over here.
Thank you, Farida.
Sorry, can I add something more as well?
Please do.
Anand also spoke about traditional ecological knowledge, and I believe that we do have our answers in the past. When we speak about sacred crows, they were maintained for a particular reason. There were plenty of things it's not just represents it. I believe they were medicinal banks. I will refer to them as banks, where you take something out of it, probably medicinal plants, and then you replant them, use them. But we have lost that knowledge, and that losing that knowledge about dealing with things matters a lot, and hampers our growth currently and in the future to address issues. And so these are basically socio-ecological systems, and we need to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. Anand, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
So I think, connecting what both Rahul, Hamari, as well as Farida has said, I think one of the major things we are seeing is what is called as, either criminalization or, shaming of traditional diets. Grubs and insects and grasshoppers and things were part of traditional diet. Now that diet has been, go vegan, go vegetarian, eat local first. Eat from the season, eat local, don't eat, have coffee from Madagascar or, whatever. While you're doing that, you're going vegan. Please don't do that. So that is one thing. Don't criminalize or don't, shame traditional diets. That was their protein they used to get, because the soil is very poor. If you see where zoom happens, the soil is poor. There is so much of rain takes away the nitrogen. So they had to eat the grubs, and then the trees the borers are not available because they are eaten up. They were diet. So I think there was a good cyclicity that was there. And now that cyclicity is gone away, of course, numbers do matter, human numbers. I think that's where everything comes in. So, whether people eat fish, when you have 7,000-kilometer coastline, then there are millions of communities and houses which are dependent on the seafood, right? And the sea is 3 times bigger than the land that is there. So we have to understand that the interlinkages of diet and conservation have to go hand in hand, of course, in control of everything. I don't mean out of control. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you for for your comments and bringing quite a few threads together. I'm afraid time is up now, basically. So I wanted to give at least 30 seconds to each experts for any concluding remark, but I don't think I have those 30 seconds for it. Okay, so I think with this, maybe we find another opportunity to really get delve deeper into the questions which were raised. And I have been working and thinking around these issues for many years. I also had quite a few experiences to share, but then I don't have that luxury of time at this point of time. So thank you very much for bringing this session on, Anand and the team, our volunteers, and our experts and our participants for very enriching and informative discussions. I know we have not been able to discuss all the questions, but we did discuss quite a few questions, and we do. So we hope to see you soon on some kind of a similar platform. And may force be with you. Keep doing the kind of work which you have been doing, which is needed. And as Abhiir said in the very beginning, it's not that you need to be of certain age, of a certain type, of a certain background to get engaged into climate action. All of us are equally capable and responsible to get into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So we need to leave the room, right?
No, Rahul will be closing the session in a minute. So Amrita had an announcement.
Amrita, please go ahead.
Before we go back to the main rooms, I just had an announcement to make saying the links that we had shared earlier, please everyone, if you can fill your details and your thoughts, and from the discussion, if you picked up some ideas, please do fill into those Excel sheets so that we can compile the data and get really good output from all the discussions that we had today. So I'll reshare the links again so that everyone has them handy.
I'll point out to everybody that we are collating some of the ideas that all of you have given. Of course, we will get in touch again with you for more details, but we're going to come up with a climate actioneers manual, which will have all these 24 different perspectives that we have taken in this conference. Today, we have taken 6 perspectives just now, and then tomorrow we'll take 6 perspectives in the morning, 6 perspectives in the afternoon, and then day after 6 more perspectives. So, we are trying to see what parallels, because each of these will sort of, overlap with each other. So we will get in touch with you, and we would love your inputs, both participants and the experts and the moderators. So thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Thank you once again.
Thank you.
We'll be heading back in the room in 45 seconds. Anybody has any thing else to say? We have quick 2 seconds.
Yeah. 5 seconds. Yes. Go ahead.
Open
for all. Yeah. 27, 26, 25. We do have 25 seconds. Yeah, come on.
Anand, I really love the idea of documenting the biodiversity around of my interest, and I'm surely going to do and share it with you.
Great.